Update on how my boyfriend is threatening to expose our SCX tape if I don't get back with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. Like I said in part 3, he's on his best behavior, and it's been 2 weeks now. I'm constantly being told by him that he's never going to release the tape as long as I stay with him. Now he's acting like the best boyfriend ever. He's treating my parents with respect. He's even given me money to give my parents. You guys won't believe what he did. The day I took him back after he threatened me, asked for permission to come to my house and have dinner with my parents. Like I said before, he wasn't asking for permission to show up at my house. That's when he tells my parents that he wants to take care of us, meaning he wants to give us an allowance. Immediately, my parents were happy. I thought they were going to say no, and my dad was like, absolutely. We love you. We accept you. And now my parents are pressuring me to stay with him because he's giving them money. He's giving my dad $2,500 a month, which is enough to cover the mortgage payment. My parents don't know about the SEX tape, and I don't know if I should tell them. Part 5 is up. My boyfriend is threatening to expose our SEX tape if I don't stay with him. This is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. Now that he's giving my parents money, of course my parents want me to stay with him. This just goes from bad to worse. I actually started falling in love with him again because he's been behaving so good. We've been doing it like crazy, and he's always with me. Even if I'm working in my apartment, he'll just come over and make me dinner, or he'll do my laundry, something he never used to do. 2 nights ago, I asked him why he was still threatening me with the SEX tape. That's when he told me that he had a fear of losing me. I explained to him that he'll never lose me because we have a great relationship. That's when he looks at me and says, as soon as I delete that video, you'll leave me. And he grabbed me by the neck. Part 6 is, my boyfriend is threatening to expose our SEX tape if I don't stay with him. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. When he grabbed me by the neck and told me that I belonged to him and that nobody else could ever touch me ever again. I told him that I didn't want anyone else. Once he fell asleep, I took your guys' advice. I looked for the tape and I finally found it. He put it in a safe and he forgot that he told me the code. I immediately left his apartment and went straight home. I went to the cops the next morning and they told me that the only way that I could prove that he was threatening me was if I had a text message or a recording, that they can't just go arrest him because he told me. Here's where you guys are gonna get mad at me. I didn't break up with him. I told him that I would keep the tape. And surprisingly, he accepted. But he doesn't know that I went to the police. My parents still don't know. He's still extremely possessive and jealous and is constantly all over me. But I guess I kind of like that as long as he doesn't go back to being crazy. Now I'm just afraid that he'll try to record us again. Or that he has a copy. Oh my god, do you guys think he has a copy? He also bought me a new car 2 days ago. What should I do? Story time about how my date broke into my house and tried to choke me. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. 2 years ago, I signed up to Hinge. I matched with a really cute guy. Lived in my city, drove an expensive car, and was looking for fun. At the time, I was not looking for a relationship. I just wanted to have some fun. It was lust at first sight. We were both attracted to each other and he couldn't keep his hands off me. Now, I did like this, but he was taking it a little bit far. We were sitting at a booth and had some drinks. This is when he kissed me. He did not ask me for permission and he put his hand on my thigh. I let him do it because I knew I was having fun. But then he started inviting himself over to my apartment. I told him that I was definitely not comfortable with him coming over. He made a joke about following me home and coming in and doing whatever he wanted to me. I laughed it off but was creeped out. I told him I got gassy and that I needed to go home. What was about to happen was terrifying. Part 2 is story time about how my date broke into my house and tried to choke me. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Instead of me on Instagram. I lied and told him that I was getting gassy and I needed to go home. We say goodbye in the restaurant and he walks me to my car. I drive off and I check if he's following me. No, he wasn't. As soon as I get home, I decide to order pizza because I was still hungry. I mean, I actually was not gassy. While I'm waiting for the pizza to arrive, I run a bath and put my music on as loud as possible. By the way, I live alone and my house is pretty big. I decide to take a quick shower to take my makeup off, and 5 minutes into my shower, my phone starts to ring. It's my date. He says, "Are you sure you don't want me to come over? You look lonely." I told him, "How do you know what I look like?" Then he says, "Just send me your address." I did not. I hung up and blocked him right away. I get out of the shower and I hear the doorbell ring. When I open the door, nobody is there. What happens next is terrifying. Part 2 is story time about how my date broke into my house and tried to choke me. I open my front door and nobody is there. Remember, I thought it was the pizza guy. I look closer, and that's when I see a dark figure standing in the corner. Can you imagine how scary that is? My knees instantly started to shake, and that's when I realized it was my date. I told him if he left now, I wouldn't call the cops. Then he runs at me while taking off his belt, puts the belt around my neck and starts squeezing so hard. Almost immediately passed out. I was wearing a bathrobe. He ripped it off of me. Then he said the creepiest thing. "I want to see what you look like passed out." Then the doorbell rings. It's the pizza guy. He finally lets go and tells me that he'll be back. I run outside and the pizza guy stays with me until the cops come. Unfortunately, the police never found him. He obviously lied about his name. I'm afraid he's gonna come back for me. What should I do? Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Instead of me on Instagram. The bitch that used to be my best friend, yeah, she's the worst person in the entire world. By the time I met her, my boyfriend and I had already been going out for 6 months. I met her through some friends and her and I got along really well. She was wild and crazy and she brought that wild and crazy side out of me. And at the time it was something that I did need, but I didn't realize just how wild she was. Let me tell you what this girl was like. She was the type of girl that would try to bring up sex in every conversation. Like no matter who we were talking to, she would always bring up sex. She would always try to impress everyone about how much she knew about it and how much she needed sex all the time. And sometimes I would ask her to not talk about it so much. And her response to that was, "Stop being such a prudy bitch." My boyfriend and I decided to have all our friends over at my apartment for dinner. Since I had just met her, I decided to invite her over. This was the first time she was meeting my boyfriend and all of my friends. And of course, she proceeded to monopolize the entire conversation all night, and all she talked about was sex. Then she went to the bathroom and took off her jacket. She came out in her bra and shorts. Part 2 is a story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. That's when she came out of the bathroom in her bra and a pair of shorts. Mind you, we have a bunch of our friends over having dinner at my place. I get up from the table and I ask her what's up. That's when she says that it's way too hot in my apartment and that I needed to turn down the temperature. I told her I'd give her a t-shirt if she wanted to, and she said no. I'm comfortable in my body and I don't care if people look at me. When I look around, I see everyone staring at her. Obviously, all the guys are like oogling her goodies, but all the girls that are there with their guys are instantly upset. That's when my boyfriend bursts out laughing and says, "What's wrong with her?" She just starts laughing maniacally at what my boyfriend said. Then she goes and sits down next to my boyfriend and starts joking with him. You might be thinking I'm so stupid for this, but I decided to let it go. Oh yeah, she's also the type of person that never wants to go home. That's when I had to be honest with her and I told her that she was making everyone uncomfortable. And I asked her to leave, which she did. A few days later, she comes over to my place so that we can get ready to go out. My boyfriend was gonna go out with his friends and I was gonna go out with her. 2 seconds after she comes into my apartment, she walks out of the bathroom completely naked. And my boyfriend's just sitting there on the couch watching her. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. That's when she comes out completely naked. You could see everything. Boobs, butt, and V. And my boyfriend is sitting on the couch. As she comes out of the bathroom, his jaw drops to the floor. Then she says to me, "Oh my god, I couldn't find a towel, sorry." She walks straight into the guest bedroom where she has her clothes. My boyfriend and I look at each other and I'm completely disgusted. He, on the other hand, thought it was hilarious, so he starts laughing. Then she comes out of the guest bedroom in panties and a bra. I mean, I guess at least she wasn't naked this time. That's when I tell her, "Do you need help getting dressed or something?" She says, "Oh no, girl, I'm just thirsty. I'm gonna get something to drink." So I said to her, "I'll get you something to drink. You can go get dressed." At this point, I had it. But guess what? This wasn't the last time. A few weeks later, I wanted to go to her place to get ready this time. But then she insisted on coming over to mine instead. That's when I got the feeling that she had done all of that to get my boyfriend's attention. And I straight up told her, "Are you just walking around naked at my place just because you want my boyfriend to see you?" Of course, she denied it. She says, "He's cute, but he's not that cute." What? Part 4 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. At this point, she had been naked in front of my boyfriend twice, but it wasn't the last time. She came over to pick me up one time and I told her to wait for me downstairs. Well, instead of waiting for me downstairs, she decided to come up to my apartment. While I was in the bedroom changing, my boyfriend let her in. That's when she comes straight into my bedroom without even knocking and says, "Hey girl, do you have a dress I can wear?" The dress she was wearing was absolutely perfect. I asked her why and she said that she didn't feel sexy enough. Without even me saying yes, she started raiding my closet. Then she pulls out a very expensive dress I had not even put on yet. My boyfriend was standing in the doorway just watching the whole thing go down. I look at my boyfriend and he just rolls his eyes at me. Then out of nowhere, she takes off her dress and she's completely naked underneath. She looks at my boyfriend and says, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there." My boyfriend turned around and walked away. I finally closed the door and confronted her about it. She told me that I'm a prude and that I needed to relax. I kicked her out and we haven't spoken since. She's been begging to talk to me and hang out. My boyfriend told me that if I felt uncomfortable around her, then for her not to come over. But he says that he's fine with her. His reaction also upset me too. What should I do? Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. I come from a really big family. My mom has 5 sisters and 1 brother, and my dad has 4 brothers and sisters. All of them have their own kids, so I have a lot of cousins. And this means we have a lot of family get-togethers. Every single weekend, someone is hosting a party. We all get together and eat, and it's actually a really nice time. But there's always that one creepy uncle. In my case, it's my mom's brother. He's 46-year-old and has never married, but he's a bachelor. He's got money, so he basically has a bunch of sugar babies. Whenever my family tells him that he needs to get married, he says he'll never get married to anybody. He thinks women only exist for the pleasure of men. When I turned 16, I noticed that he would stare at me a lot. At first, it was just staring. Every now and again, he never did anything really creepy then, but just the staring was enough for me. I never told my mom about it then, not until I turned 18. This is when he started making comments like, "Wow, you're growing into your body," or "Wow, you got great hips." He would make comments about how I was growing up, like Ew. He even told my dad that he needed to keep me away from guys because I was growing up really quickly. And because of my curves, men would think that I was a woman. This is when I finally told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable. She thought it was funny at first, so I avoided him at all costs. Part 2. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's me on Instagram. When I told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable, she laughed it off. She thought it was funny. She said, oh, you know how he is. So from that point on, I basically avoided my uncle every time we were at a family event. When I turned 20, this is when things got even worse. He would ask me things like if I was a virgin, or if I had a boyfriend, if I had ever been on dates. And one time he even told me that he would get very jealous if I ended up bringing a guy to one of our family events. One time he complimented me on the dress that I was wearing, so after that, I only wore baggy clothes to family events. The fact that I had to change the way that I dress so that he could control himself makes me sick. I finally told my mom again that my uncle was always bothering me. It's when she told me that the world is filled with men like him, and that all I needed to do was just ignore him. So I told my dad everything. My dad took it a little more seriously and told my uncle that he needed to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's me on Instagram. I finally told my dad and he told my uncle to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed and told my dad that he was overreacting. And that all he said to me was that I was a pretty girl. What a liar. In part 1 and 2, I told you guys that it was getting worse, but here's where it actually gets even worse. Like I said, I have a really big family, so my cousins are growing up too. One of them just turned 13 and my uncle cannot stop staring at her. She's maturing a lot quicker than most 13-year-olds. He's already staring at her. So here's what I did. At the next family event, I sat right next to him. Every time he would stare at one of my cousins or try to make a comment at me, I called him out for it in front of everybody. I even recorded the things that he said. The fact that I even have to do this at a family event makes me sick. Instead of enjoying my time with my family, I have to sit next to my creepy uncle policing him. Anyway, it's totally worth it though. I'm making sure that my cousins don't feel uncomfortable. After I had enough recordings of him saying nasty things, at the next family event, I showed it to my grandma. I basically played it for the entire family. My grandma told him that he couldn't come to any more events if he was going to behave that way. And of course, he apologized to everyone right away. But not to me, he apologized to my dad. After his half-ass apology, he was let back into family events. I don't think that's enough punishment. Give me some ideas because I think I deserve justice. Creepy uncle.